Wolf Face Chapter 1. The Unending Ledger. The cold weight of the Citadel's granite walls matched the knot in Alpha Kael Thorne's chest. Not fear, he reminded himself, but irritation. He was built of discipline, his heart a fortified muscle that only beat for order. Kael sat at his massive, obsidian desk, the surface cluttered with charts that detailed the Wolfstone Pack's decline. Not violent decline, nothing so exciting, but a slow, insidious rot. The numbers didn't lie. Economic productivity was down 7%. Medical reports showed an alarming spike in low-grade, non-fatal illnesses among the lower ranks. The latest reports, Alpha. Beta, Reese murmured, stepping into the room. Reese was loyal, his scent a mix of old leather and duty. Kael didn't look up. Another spike in lethargy? Worse, sir. They call it spiritual malaise now. The workers feel disconnected. Like the very soil beneath the Citadel is sour. Reese paused, a nervous tremor in his voice. Some whisper the moon goddess has withdrawn her favor. Kael slammed his hand on the desk, the heavy thud echoing like a gunshot. Too loud. Deep down, he knew the truth. This was not spiritual. Spiritual malaise is a symptom, Beta. It's a failure of administration and resource management, because those lower-ranked wolves lack the self-discipline to sustain themselves. He leaned back. Discipline. That was his core strength, the unwavering foundation he built his life upon since witnessing his predecessor fall due to sentimentality. Emotion is a weakness. Always. What followed was a quiet exchange about budgets and shifting labor roles. Kael's goal was clear: find a logical, administrative solution to the decay. He was emotionally cold, stressed by facts and utterly dismissive of feelings, because feelings led to chaos. Reese nodded, but his eyes held a strange, sad pity. Still, Alpha, Reese pressed, the whispers link this to the prophecy. He dropped a sealed scroll onto the table, old parchment, smelling faintly of ancient magic and dust. Kael's jaw tightened. Prophecy. More sentimental nonsense. But then, he saw the seal, the ancient mark of the Elder Council, activated. In the span of a breath, Kael's irritation vanished, replaced by the sharp, focused edge of necessity. He tore the seal open. The text was terse, coded, confirming the prophecy of the marginalized mate was activating, requiring the immediate selection of the true mate. That's why he felt the tightening in his chest. His future was no longer his own. Open Loop 1. Who framed Kael's predecessor, and what was the exact trauma that forced Kael's iron rule? As a result, Kael's iron-fisted rule, the very thing he prided himself on, was about to be sacrificed to an unpredictable magical decree. He needed answers, and he knew only one person held the key to the ancient text. He needed the Elder. Wolf Face Chapter 2. The Elder's Warning. The Elder's study was a stark contrast to Kael's own office. It smelled of dried herbs, dust, and something earthy, like fresh rain on pine needles, the smell of the fallow wood, where the marginalized wolves lived. Not only that, but the light here was dim, filtered through stained glass windows depicting forgotten legends. Kael felt his skin crawl. Alpha Kael, Elder Saurian greeted him, his voice a gravelly whisper. You seek confirmation of your fate. Kael didn't mince words. He didn't have time for the Elder's theatrics. I seek logistical requirements. The prophecy requires a mate. I will fulfill the duty. Which lineage? Saurian smiled, a slow, knowing pull of the lips. The Alpha of logic. Always seeking the straightest line, even when fate demands the most crooked. Speak plainly, Kael commanded, his voice a low, authoritative rumble that usually cracked compliance. Saurian didn't flinch. The prophecy demands the marginalized mate, the one from the bloodline that the pack has cast out, despised and forgotten. The Luna who brings healing where you bring order. Saurian pointed to a faded tapestry showing a majestic, silver wolf standing on broken ground, green vines growing from its paws. It was a beautiful, haunting image. And the specific bloodline? Kael asked, his patience wearing thin. The line of the veins, Saurian whispered, leaning in. The dead Omega, her mother, and the daughter, Elara Vane. The name hit Kael like a physical blow. Elara Vane. The girl was a ghost, hidden away in the forest cabin, the living symbol of his pack's prejudice and weakness. He remembered hearing the gossip, her mother, ostracized, dying without rank. That's why choosing her was unthinkable. It was political suicide. She is a nobody, Kael argued, struggling to keep his tone flat. Truth be told, the thought of binding himself to someone so unstructured made his control tremble. But then, Saurian's eyes, the color of weak tea, fixed on Kael's own golden gaze. The prophecy also warns that if you choose a mate purely for duty, it will draw the heart into the bargain. A terrifying trade for a man like you, Alpha. Kael scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. My heart is disciplined. It is not an item for trade. He would never risk the emotional chaos that defined his mother's downfall. He saw the prophecy as a logistical problem, not a romantic one. What does the elder know about alpha strength? Despite that, the seed of Saurian's warning, drawing the heart into the bargain, lodged in Kael's mind. Not only that, but the very idea of Elara Vane, the most unsuitable wolf possible, was now inextricably linked to his throne. He would have to choose this political burden, or risk the entire pack. The only way to guarantee his rule was to submit to the prophecy's terms completely. Wolf Face Chapter 3. The Calculated Decision. Kael left the elder and moved to a hidden overlook above the Citadel's main courtyard. From here, he could watch the preparations for the funeral. He smelled the scent of rich perfume and smug entitlement floating up from the courtyard. He watched Lysandra Vane, Elara's aunt and the most influential member of the High Council, directing staff with the arrogant flick of her wrist. She was sharp, controlling, and possessed an ambition that tasted like brass and stale power. She had been campaigning for weeks to marry her daughter into the Alpha line. Kael saw the truth clearly. Lysandra and her High Council were the rot. They were not the solution to the pack's decay. They were the cause, clinging to wealth and privilege, while the marginalized suffered. Because of that, choosing Lysandra's line would only intensify the pack's illness. Kael's mind was a fortress of logic. To secure his rule and fulfill the prophecy correctly, he needed the deepest possible disruption. He needed a lightning strike. How do I cut out the rot? He thought, his eyes narrowed. I don't choose the compromise. I choose the extreme. Just like that, everything changed. Kael realized choosing Elara Vane was the only decisive, pragmatically disruptive move. The pack would fracture, yes, but then Lysandra would have no claim, and the ancient magic of the prophecy would be bound to the purest form of marginalization. It was a risky path, but the most logical path to stability. He would trade temporary chaos for long-term order. He watched Lysandra deliver instructions to a nervous servant. She thinks she is safe. She thinks the Luna title is hers. Suddenly, Kael's own internal monologue shifted. He saw the funeral hall, the gathered pack, the perfect arena for a display of absolute, unchallengeable alpha power. What is the exact nature of the magical illness Lysandra is controlling, and how does it manifest physically? Not only that, but the sight of Lysandra's condescending expression fueled a cold fury in Kael, not emotional, but protective of his territory. Which meant he would move now. He smoothed the lapel of his tailored black suit, a cold, elegant armor. His mate would be the girl hidden in the woods. His Luna would be the one the pack despised. He would lock himself into the path of duty, sealing Elara's fate and his own, because he believed duty was the only path to true alpha strength. He strode out of his office, his boots clicking purposefully on the stone floor of the Citadel, his scent, pure alpha dominance and cold cedar, preceding him. He was iron-willed, heading straight for the funeral hall, ready to make his announcement and usher in the coming storm. Wolf Face Chapter 4. The Interruption. The grand hall was suffocatingly warm, heavy with the scent of expensive morning lilies and Lysandra's overly sweet jasmine perfume. Every pack member who mattered was there, dressed in black, but the atmosphere wasn't grief, it was expectation. They were waiting to see who Kael would choose to solidify his power. Kael saw Lysandra standing at the podium, her voice ringing with false piety. She wasn't eulogizing the deceased. She was condemning Elara Vane, who stood alone near the back, looking small and utterly terrified. A sad testament to a line that chose ostracization over duty, Lysandra purred, her eyes flicking toward Elara like a snake preparing to strike. A line that provided only weakness, and one whose surviving member can offer the alpha only. Without warning, it happened. The moment Lysandra's gaze landed on Elara, Kael felt a jolt, not psychic, but primal. It was a bolt of white-hot lightning that detonated in his chest, sending a fierce, blinding current straight through his alpha core. The cold discipline that was his entire life cracked. The moment their eyes locked, across the vast room, the mate bond surged. It was a dizzying, confusing warmth, overwhelming his senses with the faintest scent of Elara's fear mixed with a surprisingly deep, grounding forest aroma. His wolf, a beast usually leashed tighter than iron, clawed at the surface. Mine. The word was a silent, guttural roar in his mind. Kael ruthlessly suppressed the surge. He choked it back, tasting copper and pure, panicked rage at the loss of control. He kept walking, one heavy, measured step after another. At that moment, Kael knew he had been wrong about the Elder's warning. The bond was real, painful, and terrifyingly strong. He reached the front platform. Instead of letting Lysandra finish her condemnation, Kael cut her off with a single, sharp motion of his hand. "The service is concluded." His voice boomed, thick with alpha authority, yet internally rough from the fight he'd just won against his own biology. He stood directly opposite Lysandra, staring her down. He had to establish control and inflict the maximum political damage immediately. Before either could speak, Kael delivered the blow. "The prophecy of the marginalized mate is fulfilled. Elara Vane is my true mate and your new Luna." A sound, like the collective intake of 500 breaths, filled the hall. Lysandra's face went white, her perfect composure shattering into confusion and fury. Kael met Elara's gaze again. Her terror had curdled into hostile shock. Her heart skipped a beat as Kael's golden eyes, currently burning with suppressed, unwanted heat, met hers. She didn't know what scared her more, Lysandra's hatred or Kael's terrifying claim. Even so, he had a role to play. He was the cold alpha, the man of duty, not the victim of a mating pull. Which meant he needed to solidify the boundary between their ranks immediately. Kael commanded his betas, Roan and Reese, his voice a flat, unemotional blade. "Escort the Luna to the Citadel. Immediately. She will be prepared." Kael met Elara's terrified, hostile gaze, feeling a twinge of something that might be guilt, before commanding his betas to escort her away. Wolf Face Chapter 5, The Private Command. The tension broke the moment Kael returned to his study. The silence there was heavy, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breath. He fought the distracting mate bond, a constant, low-frequency hum beneath his skin that threatened his focus. He had barely poured himself a drink when the door burst open. Lysandra, her elegance now frayed by pure, spiteful fury, stormed in. Her scent was sharp, acidic, rage barely contained. "You chose her?" Lysandra hissed, her hands clenched. "The daughter of the Omega who died in shame? The pack will view this as a weakness. You cannot bind yourself to a tainted vessel, Alpha, because her bloodline carries the stain of disloyalty." Kael set his jaw. He could not, and would not, allow her to dismantle his strategic choice. The prophecy is absolute, Lysandra. It demands the marginalized mate. To ignore it is to risk the collapse of the pack, a risk I will not take for your pride. Choose my daughter, then. A proper beta line, strong and disciplined. Your daughter is predictable, Lysandra. Predictability breeds complacency, and complacency breeds the decay we see today. Kael's voice was lethal, precise. He wasn't insulting her. He was stating a fact of his political analysis. As the silence stretched, the mate bond pulsed, a sudden, warm throb against his ribs, as if acknowledging the danger Lysandra posed. Kael crushed the warmth. "Listen to me, Lysandra. Kael said, leaning over his desk, his eyes radiating pure, non-negotiable authority. Elara Vane is my Luna. She is a political necessity, nothing more. But she is my necessity. You will treat her with the respect due her rank, or you will find yourself banished to the fallow wood. Not only that, but Kael had seen the fear in her eyes when he spoke of banishment. He knew he had her cornered. Yet he recognized the danger he had unleashed. He officially alienated Lysandra, making her the active antagonist. He needed to confirm the exact rules of the bond to find a loophole, or at least the full extent of his prison. Next, Kael dismissed Lysandra with a final, cutting gesture. He walked to the hidden safe behind a tapestry. He needed to reread the precise terms of his confinement. He needed his guarded copy of the prophecy text. Wolf faced Chapter 6, The Tour of the Cage. Soon after his confrontation with Lysandra, Kael decided to handle the transfer personally. He found Elara sitting in a sterile reception room, huddled on a velvet chair. She was like a woodland creature trapped in a golden snare, small, quiet, and smelling faintly of wild mint, a scent that cut through the Citadel's stale air. With a single glance, Kael felt the bond thrum again, softer this time, but insistent. He ignored it, focusing on his duty. Luna Vane, he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. Follow me. He led her through the labyrinthine corridors to Luna's suite, a vast, opulent space designed for a queen. To Elara, it looked like a gilded cage. This is your home now, Kael announced, gesturing to the silken drapes and marble floors. It is mandatory that you reside here for the binding period. Elara Vane finally spoke, her voice a low, breathy whisper, surprisingly steady. Why me, Alpha? Why not Lysandra's daughter? Because you are the most disruptive, the most marginalized, and therefore the only choice to correctly fulfill the ancient mandate, Kael explained, his logic cold and brutal. Because the prophecy demands an imbalanced correction, and you are the living symbol of the pack's forgotten core. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. Her voice trembled as she spoke. So I am a tool, Alpha? A political strategy? You are a duty, Luna. A functional asset to ensure the political health of this pack. Kael emphasized every word, trying to drive the point home, trying to prevent any foolish hope from blooming between them, which meant he had to be cruel to be pragmatic. Our union is a necessity. You will not embarrass the Alpha line. You will not speak of your past. You will follow every instruction. Before the words left her lips, he sensed the hurt, deep and immediate. In the quiet that followed, Kael almost flinched. Keep the wall up. Keep the wall up. He turned to leave, satisfied he had established the clear, cold boundaries. But then, he noticed something on the cold stone floor by the doorway. A single, dried herb, its delicate, serrated edge snapped off. Elara must have carried it from the fallow wood, a small, natural piece of the outside world disturbingly out of place in his structured life. As Kael leaves, he sees a single, dried herb Elara carried from the forest fall onto the Citadel's cold stone floor, a small, natural thing disturbingly out of place in his structured world. Wolf faced Chapter 7, The Council Veto. Kael stood rigid at the head of the high council table, the mahogany polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the cold determination in his eyes. The meeting was the immediate political fallout of his choice. As a result, the tension in the room was so thick you could taste it, metallic and dangerous. Lysandra Vane struck first, her posture impeccably controlled, but her scent betrayed her, a bitter tang of thwarted power. Alpha, she began, her tone dripping with false concern, while we honor the prophecy, the new Luna, Elara Vane, is untrained. Unproven. Because of that, the pack's stability demands we restrict the Luna's powers, specifically, removing her veto over resource allocation until she proves her fitness. Kael listened, outwardly calm, but internally counting the votes against him. If he allowed this, the prophecy's corrective power would be neutralized. He looked across the room to where Elara sat in the assigned Luna chair. She wore a simple, dark dress that seemed to swallow the opulence of the room. He expected trembling hands or a bowed head, the standard Omega posture. Instead, he watched her. She didn't know what scared her more, Lysandra's venom or the weight of Kael's gaze. No matter how hard she tried to disappear, Kael tracked her every movement. At that moment, Kael registered her stillness. Elara wasn't looking at him. She was observing the room like a strategist. Her quiet eyes tracked the nervous twitches of the council members, the exact moment the younger lords shifted their weight to align with Lysandra. She wasn't a victim. She was gathering intelligence. Kael slammed his hand lightly on the table, a signal of absolute authority. Luna's powers are mandated by tradition and the prophecy itself. To restrict them is to violate the mandate. He paused, letting the silence roar. The veto is rejected. Luna's authority stands because the pack needs the full, uncompromised fulfillment of the prophecy. He had been forced to publicly defend her position to keep the prophecy intact. That's why he felt a flare of grudging respect for her composure. She had not panicked. She had simply observed. But then, Kael noticed something else. The junior beta who served Elara water looked pale and jumpy. Kael glanced at the staff position near her quarters. They all looked subtly worse than the rest. That night, Kael found himself wondering if the pervasive malaise was worse near her. The air thickened around the mystery of her effect on the Citadel. Wolf-Face Chapter 8 The Unseen Healing. Come morning, Kael was standing on the training grounds, watching his guards run drills. His personal guard, Roan, approached, the scent of fresh sweat and slight confusion clinging to him. Alpha, Roan began, adjusting his heavy gear. There's a strange efficiency developing in the lower ranks. Kael raised an eyebrow. Explain, Roan. Servants, guards on the night shift, kennel masters, they're less volatile, less sick. And the kitchen staff are suddenly reporting fewer spoilage issues. And the source? Kael demanded, instantly suspicious. What's worse was that improvement defied his administrative efforts. It's Luna, sir, Roan admitted, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. Low-ranking wolves, the ones near the fallow with lineage, they've been sneaking up to her suite. She's been secretly giving them tea and bombs. Roan shifted uncomfortably. I received one myself, for a persistent ache. It worked. Immediately. Kael stared at Roan, his analytical mind warring with his prejudice. Folk medicine? That was the realm of the weak and superstitious. Yet Roan's honesty was absolute, because Roan was incapable of lying. He registered her utility, despite his skepticism. Her core strength. Healing. The very thing the prophecy promised. She contradicts the official healers? Kael asked, his voice low. She compliments them, sir. She seems to understand the minor ailments the formal medicine ignores. She doesn't ask for thanks. She simply provides. On the other hand, this quiet capacity for action contradicted Kael's assumption of her passivity. She wasn't just a political tool. She was an active, useful component, which meant she needed to be tested under pressure. If her gift was real, it could be the cure for the pervasive pack decay he'd been fighting. After that, Kael made a decision. He would test her skill on a case the official healers had failed spectacularly, a case that threatened the stability of the breeding lines. Wolf-Face Chapter 9 The Test of the Sick Pup. That's why Kael found himself standing in Elara's opulent but clinical suite, holding a basket containing a sickly, near-death pack pup. The pup was listless, its breathing shallow, its coat dull, a case the official healers had given up on, pronouncing the animal too weak for modern treatments. Elara knelt instantly, her natural, warm scent immediately overriding the metallic cleanliness of the Citadel stone. Kael watched, detached, waiting for the inevitable panic or failure. Instead, she was composed. She didn't coo or pity the pup. She calmly assessed it. With every heartbeat, Kael noted the quiet discipline in her movements. She reached into a small leather pouch she had somehow brought with her, pulling out crushed green leaves. Not rare, she explained, her voice soft but focused. Just correct. The pup is suffering from an inflamed spleen. It needs this, white horehound, for the fever, mixed with fresh spring water, not distilled. She looked up at Kael, her large brown eyes steady and demanding. I will need a specific type of disciplined care. No noise, stable warmth, and a spoon of this broth every hour on the hour. Do you understand, Alpha? Kael was stunned into silence. She was commanding him, not rudely, but with the quiet authority of her unique knowledge. She wasn't asking, she was dictating the terms of the cure. What followed was Kael's own surprising compliance. He detailed the instructions to Roan, who stood guard. Kael begins to rely on her professionally because she displays the quiet, efficient discipline that he respects above all else. As the truth unraveled, Kael saw her not as Elara Vane, the ostracized Omega daughter, but as Elara Vane, the gifted healer, a valuable political asset. To make things worse, Lysandra could not know of this emerging utility. Kael's coldness had protected Elara initially, but now he needed to protect her skill. Next, Kael assigned a trusted guard to discreetly watch Elara, now worried less about her escaping and more about Lysandra silencing her emerging usefulness. Werewolf Face Chapter 10: The Sabotage and the Shift. The day started with a sharp, sickening smell: poison. By the time Kael received the report, the Alpha was already moving. The tracking scent was fouled, Roan shouted, his voice tight with fear. It's leading the hunting party straight toward the Greyfen Marsh, quicksand territory. Kael's rage was cold and immediate. Sabotage. A direct threat to pack life. Because of that, the order had been fractured, and he needed to immediately restore it. He could smell the lingering, artificial toxin, a sharp, metallic binder that confused the wolves' noses, proving this was no accident. Lysandra's hand was all over this escalating aggression. Who created the tracking scent? Kael demanded, his alpha voice low and dangerous. Jareth, sir, but he swore he followed the formula. Get Elara Vane here. Now, Kael commanded. He didn't trust his own healers. They dealt with symptoms, not toxins. Elara, the herbalist, understood poisons. He found himself grudgingly respecting her efficiency. As if summoned, Elara arrived moments later, breathless but composed. The moment she smelled the contaminated sample, her eyes widened, not in fear, but recognition. It's a derivative of nightshade, she whispered, instantly recognizing the dark, earthy scent beneath the metallic tang. It doesn't kill quickly. It creates disorientation and paralysis. The hunters will be lost before they realize they're sinking. A neutralizing agent. Quickly, Kael snapped, the urgency fueling his focus. Instead of listing herbs, Elara grabbed a small, unmarked vial from a medical satchel she now carried everywhere. This. Elderberry extract and strong witch hazel. Apply this to their scent markers. It will temporarily mask the poison's effect and let them track the way back. Kael watched her work in the makeshift dispensary, her movements precise, fast, and driven by quiet competency. For the first time, he was working side by side with her, not commanding from above. The space between them burned with the sheer intensity of their shared purpose. Moments later, as they both reached for a bowl of the neutralizing agent, their bare arms brushed. It was an accidental touch, brief and purely functional. And just like that, everything changed. The mate bond surged, not the gentle hum of the Citadel, but an overwhelming, uncontrolled wave of heat that threatened to buckle Kael's knees. It was pure, raw desire mixed with a shocking sense of relief. Safety. Her scent of wild mint suddenly became intoxicating. Kael instantly pulled back, his hand shaking. His control was compromised. He realized he was forced to work side by side with Elara for survival, and the mate bond was punishing him for trying to keep her at a distance. He was furious at the unwanted connection, but grudgingly respectful of her efficiency. He would not, allow that surge to happen again. He needed a distraction, something concrete to focus on. Wolf-Face Chapter 11: The Midpoint Revelation. After that, Kael ordered Elara to secure a clean space for her specialized supplies, away from the Citadel's main and clearly compromised dispensary. They were in the dusty, forgotten archive adjacent to her mother's old, closed-off suite. The room smelled of old paper, mildew, and neglect. Elara, focused on cleaning a stone shelf, frowned. "This floorboard is loose," she murmured, kneeling. Kael, standing guard and battling the residual, distracting heat from their accidental touch, watched as she lifted the plank. As the silence roared in the empty archive, she pulled out a leather-bound book, her mother's hidden journal. Elara's breath hitched. Her world tilted. "Give me that," Kael commanded, his voice sharp with alpha authority. Because he needed to know what secret she held. Elara hesitated for a beat, her instinct to protect the book warring with her ingrained obedience. She surrendered it. Kael flipped through the cramped, elegant handwriting. It wasn't just personal memories. It was an elaborate ledger. Detailed evidence of the hidden corruption. Not just tax fraud, but a magical illness, a slow-acting poison, the same compound used in the hunting scent, only diluted, being systematically introduced into the lower ranks' rations to manage their vitality and keep them docile. Lysandra's faction controlled the rot. Kael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air. His world tilted, not with heat or emotion, but with the shock of political betrayal. His pragmatic rule, his pride in the pack's order, was built on a festering, lethal lie. He was shocked and enraged, not emotionally, but politically, that his trust had been so brutally misplaced. The moment their eyes locked again, the dynamic between them fundamentally shifted. Kael was no longer the warden testing his prisoner. He was the alpha who had failed his people, and Elara held the key to his redemption. Before she could move, Kael walked to his side, pulling a heavy iron safe key from a chain beneath his tunic. He locked the journal inside the ancient safe built into the wall. Then he did the unthinkable. He gave Elara the combination, a sequence of complex runes. Kael looked at her, his golden eyes intense. He was forced to actively trust Elara's judgment over his council's loyalty, a massive psychological hurdle. They were now co-conspirators against the council, united by a dangerous, vital secret. Wolf-Face Chapter 12, The Unspoken Pact. Meanwhile, the tension between them was palpable. Kael called Elara into his private study that night. He needed absolute clarity. "The journal confirms treason," Kael stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "Lysandra is deliberately poisoning the lower ranks to ensure control and complacency. This is why the pack is sick." "And you believed me to be the rot," Elara countered quietly, her voice still steady, but imbued with a weary sadness. As if fate demanded it, Kael felt the sudden, agonizing necessity of truth. He didn't apologize, his pride wouldn't allow it yet, but he offered the closest thing an Ice King could manage. "Your mother's work is invaluable. Your knowledge is unique. It is the only path to the truth," Kael admitted, the words tasting like ash. He acknowledged her utility, acknowledging her worth. "The plan, Alpha?" Elara asked, her eyes demanding clarity. "We cannot reveal the journal yet. Lysandra will claim its forgery. We must find the location mentioned in the final entry, the place where the antidote is stored. But to buy time, we must look invincible." Kael stepped closer. He laid out a new, dangerous plan. They must pretend their bond is strengthening while secretly decoding the journal. "We accelerate the process," Kael declared. "We will be visible. We will be intimate." He didn't miss the flare of surprise, then suspicion in her eyes. "This is purely political, Luna. A charade of affection that will buy us time to decode the ledger. You must play the role of the devoted mate." The mate bond pulsed, acknowledging the shared purpose and the extreme risk. Kael fought the urge to reach out. He was forced to actively trust Elara's judgment, a massive psychological hurdle. Rather than demanding her participation, Kael ended the meeting with a cold, formal announcement. "We will host a public engagement dinner. Tomorrow night. It must appear that my choice was based on overpowering attraction, not pragmatic calculation." Without another word, he sealed their pact. Kael gave the order for a public couples engagement dinner, forcing their relationship into a higher-stakes political charade. Wolf-Face Chapter 13, The False Front. The grand ballroom of the Citadel was oppressive, smelling of roasted boar, desperation, and the nervous energy of the elite pack members. Kael stood beside Elara, his hand resting on the small of her back, a deliberate, public gesture of possession that felt like white-hot fire against his cold skin. With his scent in the air, pure alpha dominance, he was playing the role of the smitten mate. The charade of affection was excruciating for him, but necessary to convince the council the mate bond was progressing, buying them time to decode the journal. Elara, dressed in a borrowed gown that looked too fine for her simple nature, played her part flawlessly. She didn't cling or simper. She was quiet, polite, and intensely observant. In the quiet that followed a particularly awkward toast, Kael noticed how her eyes methodically scanned the entire room, tracking loyalty and dissent. She sees everything, he thought, like a forest predator. Meanwhile, Kael used the crowded, noisy environment for their covert mission. He leaned in, feigning a tender whisper. The journal mentioned the stone sentinel at the edge of the archive district, he murmured near her ear. The warm air of his breath caused her breath to catch. I've secured the coordinates. You must retrieve the hidden inventory list there. Tonight. Elara's eyes flickered once in acknowledgement. As the air thickened with the charade, they were a perfect, terrifying team, the cold commander and the silent strategist. But then, Kael saw a flicker of movement. Lysandra, looking magnificent in crimson, had been watching them with hawk-like focus. As Kael straightened, Lysandra brushed past him, her elbow deliberately hitting his jacket pocket where the coded note containing the stone sentinel's location rested. A beat later, Lysandra was gone, replaced by a nervous junior beta. As the echo faded of Lysandra's subtle motion, Kael felt a sickening lurch. The note was gone. He was furious at his own lapse in vigilance. That's why he had been so focused on emotional control. Physical control had slipped. Instead, Kael received a different note from the junior beta, a small, forged message directing Elara to the Eastern Archive, the decommissioned one, locked and filled with toxic spores. Lysandra was making her move, using Kael's own, invincible, planned against him. Wolf-Face Chapter 14, The Frame-Up and Rescue. That night, Kael was confined to his study, reviewing old military plans, trying to salvage the mess of the stolen note. He had planned to go after Lysandra, but he was too late. Without warning, the mate bond shattered his control. It wasn't a slow, warm hum anymore. It was a sudden, piercing panic that ripped through his chest, overriding his alpha authority and discipline.
Distress. Danger.
Elara was in immediate peril. Her body moved on instinct before his mind could rationalize the breach of protocol. He didn't send guards. He went himself, his senses heightened, his wolf surging forward with a primal, protective growl. He found her in the Eastern Archive, coughing, eyes watering from the toxic dust and spores Lysandra had locked inside. He threw the heavy iron door open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. But then, Lysandra appeared, impeccably timed, framed in the doorway behind him. She was smirking, her victory complete. "Alpha," she said, her voice sugary and deceptive. "I found her attempting to steal ancient artifacts. She was going to sell them to outside packs to discredit your rule. A clear act of treason, proving she is a tainted vessel." Kael turned his face a mask of primal fury, a reaction that genuinely shocked him with its intensity. He wasn't angry at the political threat. He was furious that she had hurt his mate. His voice trembled with raw, unrestrained rage, thick and dangerous. Silence. Kael stepped in front of Elara, shielding her entirely from Lysandra's gaze and the toxic air. He publicly and forcefully defies Lysandra because his instinct to protect Elara now outweighed his need for political stability. "You mistake loyalty for ambition, Lysandra. Luna was securing a vital document. You, however, are now publicly spreading treasonous lies about my chosen mate." He didn't need proof. He didn't need protocol. He needed her to back down. He pointed a shaking finger toward the hall.
"Leave. Now."
"Your authority is suspended until further notice." As the silence stretched, Lysandra's face contorted in defeat and hatred. She knew he had chosen Elara over his council's loyalty. His decision cemented the council's belief that Kael had been tainted by emotion. As the wind shifted outside, Kael received a coded warning from Roan. Lysandra is planning a massive, open challenge to his authority, a public trial of Luna, within the next 48 hours. Wolf-Face Chapter 15. The Critical Decision. After that shocking confrontation, Kael met with his most trusted, non-council, advisors in the sterile confines of his war room. They were pale, nervous, and utterly pragmatic. "Alpha, you cannot let her stand trial," Rhys pleaded, placing a hand on Kael's armored shoulder. "You must cut her loose. Claim the bond was false. It's the only way to save your rule. If you choose the girl, civil war is imminent." They urged him to choose political stability, abandon Elara. Kael looked at the maps, the logistics, the troop movements. He knew they were right. The pragmatic choice was to sacrifice Elara and restore order. Yet, he looked at the evidence of his own failure. The sick pup now thriving in Elara's care, the mother's journal detailing the rot he had ignored, the desperate panic that had ripped through the mate bond. He had asked Elara to trust him, and he had nearly let her die. He realizes he must abandon his core belief in cold pragmatism to save the pack. He knew he couldn't choose stability built on a lie. Kael stood up, his posture radiating a new kind of strength, not cold discipline, but dangerous conviction. In the echo of his voice, the air changed. "I will not cut her loose." Kael's voice was steady and absolute. "Lysandra's challenge is not about Luna. It is about the truth. I will not rule a sick pack just to maintain order. We are proceeding with the exposure of the corruption because the pack's health is now the primary directive." He chose the risky path, officially prioritizing truth over pure political pragmatism. His transformation was now underway, but his rule was placed in extreme danger. With every step he took toward the map table, his fate was sealed. Without thinking, Kael sent Elara on a secret, dangerous mission based on the journal's final, cryptic coordinates, the location of the ultimate evidence. He knew this decision would expose them both completely, but it was the only way to win. Her soul answered the silent demand. He sent her out, knowing his safety lay entirely in the hands of the woman he had just publicly claimed and privately used. Wolf-Face Chapter 16. The Public Betrayal. The Citadel's assembly hall was volatile, not just loud, but truly unstable. The air was thick with contradictory scents, fear, confusion, and the overwhelming, arrogant smugness of Lysandra and her faction. As the sky darkened outside, the pack gathered for the expected public hearing of Luna's fitness. Kael stood on the dais, his control rigid, but the protective fury from the night before was now ice-cold dread. Lysandra, flanked by 2 elder council members, executed her ultimate maneuver. "Alpha, before we proceed with the examination of Luna's character," Lysandra announced, holding up a brittle, aged scroll, "I present evidence of treason in her bloodline." She revealed a forged document and a distorted half-truth about Elara's mother's past, claiming she was a spy for a rival pack, not merely ostracized. The details were just twisted enough to be believable, and the pack, already nervous, reacted immediately. A roar of anger rose from the assembly. As the silence roared from the pack's unified anger, Kael's loyal advisors claimed civil war was imminent. They had no time to produce the antidote evidence. They had only chaos. Kael, cornered by his deepest, primal fear of pack collapse, looked out at the churning, unpredictable assembly. He had to choose the pack's stability over his heart, the ultimate pragmatic sacrifice. In the span of a breath, Kael made the agonizing, brutal decision. He chose the painful, necessary pragmatic option. He stepped forward, raising his hands, his alpha authority forcing a terrible quiet over the hall. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the internal violence of the choice. The evidence presented, while manipulated, has caused irreparable damage to the necessary trust between the Luna and the pack, Kael declared, the words like shattered glass in his throat. He looked toward the door, where Elara should have been standing. "Therefore, to maintain order and prevent fracturing, I announce a temporary, Formal separation from Elara Vane. The bond is suspended. Her duties are revoked. Just like that, everything changed. Kael had fulfilled his worst fear, sacrificing heart for stability. The severance of the formal bond was instant and physical. A sharp, violent tear ripped through his chest, replacing the bond's gentle thrum with nauseating pain. He was instantly plagued by the physical sickness of the bond's severing, the agonizing rejection of his own true mate. What followed was the sight of Elara, who had arrived secretly moments before and was standing just inside the doorway. She wasn't crying or shouting. She stared at him with empty eyes, confirming his emotional abandonment of her. Her heart skipped the final, fatal beat. Her voice trembled with unspoken grief. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the Citadel, her scent of mint fading rapidly, leaving only the scent of Lysandra's bitter victory. Wolf-Face Chapter 17 The Loss of Trust. Kael retreated to his office, physically sickened. The severed bond felt like a constant, low-grade fever. The air thickened with his emotional torment. He had won stability, but lost his soul. He paced the granite floor, desperate to justify his brutal choice.
It was for the pack.
It was for order. But then, he saw something on his desk, a crumpled piece of paper, folded into a neat square. A secret note Elara must have left before she fled. Kael unfolded it with shaking hands. It contained a crucial, coded detail about the final proof's location, a sequence of numbers related to the Citadel's old library stacks. Because of that, he knew she hadn't fled in spite. She had continued their mission. Yet, the note ended with a chilling farewell. You chose fear over truth, Alpha. I pursue the cure alone because I no longer trust the Alpha who prioritizes obedience over justice. As the truth unraveled, Kael realized he had gained temporary political calm, but lost his only chance at a true partnership. He had become the unfeeling, pragmatic ruler he thought he needed to be, and it had destroyed his bond. She felt it, clear as day, that he had abandoned her. To make things worse, he had to prove her wrong. He had to retrieve the evidence and justify his sacrifice. He followed the coded clue immediately, rushing to the old library stacks. He used the complex number sequence to unlock a hidden chamber near the stone sentinel. The space was pristine, exactly as the journal had described, a perfect hiding place. But then, Kael reached inside. The chamber was empty. The evidence was gone. With a single glance, Kael was utterly defeated. He had nothing left to fight with. Lysandra had been playing a deeper game, and in sacrificing Elara, he had surrendered their greatest weapon. Wolf-Face Chapter 18 The Dark Night of the Alpha. Meanwhile, Kael was truly alone. He stood in the silent, cold office, the failure radiating off him like a toxic cloud. His rule was failing not because of external chaos, but because of his lack of trust and emotional cowardice. Her heart skipped a beat, and Kael felt the phantom pain. He had always believed that suppressing emotion was the only path to strength, a conviction hardened by the chaos of his youth. Maybe it was fate, but now he finally confronted his core flaw. I am a failure. The pack is still rotting. The prophecy is void. The evidence is lost. I am the Ice King, and I am melting down because I am hollow. The space between them burned with the guilt of his pragmatic betrayal. He finally acknowledged the agonizing pain of the severed bond, realizing it was the cost of his cowardice. Next, Kael knew what he had to do. He had to abandon the mask. He needed Elara back, not as a political asset, but as his partner, the one who held the truth and the antidote to his pack's and his own heart's decay. As if pulled by a string, Kael walked to his command panel. He would use his greatest strength, absolute alpha authority, not for control, but for vulnerability. He needed a radical, final, honest plan. He sent out a pack-wide summons, not for a council meeting, but for all loyal betas and advisors. He would confess his fear and error. He needed to choose the risky path because the pack's health was tied to Luna's truth. He announced his final, honest plan to bring Elara back and expose the truth to the entire pack. Wolf-Face Chapter 19 The Unexpected Truth. The severance pain was a searing, constant background noise, a deserved punishment for Kael's betrayal. But then, the code Elara left behind, the sequence of numbers leading to the empty hiding space, demanded attention. Kael realized the code was only half finished. Elara hadn't intended for him to retrieve the evidence. She had intended to reveal the location, so Kael knew where Lysandra had moved it. Kael utilized an ancient, almost forgotten tracking method, a rare, non-scent-based mental calculation based on directional wind patterns and residual magnetic fields, to locate Elara. The trail led him toward the fallow wood, not deeper into it, but toward a protected, high-ground vantage point overlooking the Citadel. He found her in a small, weathered stone shelter, the only structure in the desolate area. As the wind shifted, Kael saw a leather satchel next to her containing a thick, new ledger. He realized she had not fled in defeat. She was continuing their mission, having retrieved the final evidence Lysandra had been guarding immediately after Kael's public rejection. She still fulfilled her duty, despite my betrayal. Kael approached, not as an alpha, but as a man stripped bare by failure. He did the unthinkable. He laid down his ceremonial dagger and sidearm in the dirt, a gesture of absolute surrender of control. Elara, Kael started, his voice thick with raw emotion he hadn't allowed since childhood. My actions yesterday were cowardice. I chose the illusion of order over the truth of my own conviction. I chose fear. The pack is sick, and I am sicker, because I betrayed the only person who offered the cure. In the quiet that followed, Kael met her eyes, no longer golden with alpha command, but deep with powerful remorse. He confessed his fear, his pragmatic error, and the agonizing void of the severed bond. Wolf-Face Chapter 20. The Final Bargain. Elara watched him, her expression unreadable, her scent of wild mint cautious, but no longer hostile. Her heart skipped a beat, and Kael felt the faint, ghost-like ripple of the bond, a sign that she was listening. The evidence is here, Alpha, Elara said, tapping the ledger. A complete accounting of the poison, the funding, and the council members involved. Devastating proof. Then let us use it, Kael urged. No, she countered, her voice low and steady. Not us, Alpha. You. You will walk back into that citadel and face the pack alone, admitting your failure and Lysandra's treason. You will publicly expose everything without resorting to pragmatic half-measures. You will embrace the risk of your power fracturing. It was the ultimate test, a demand that he dismantle the very foundations of his control. He agreed, his resolve instantly solidifying. I accept your terms, Kael stated, picking up his weapons and tucking the ledger securely into his jacket. We will do this at the Harvest Festival. It is the only gathering large enough to witness the truth, and the only venue where Lysandra cannot escape. With the bargain sealed, Kael's hand reached out, not to command, but to rest protectively and willingly on the small of Elara's back. The touch didn't surge with uncontrollable desire, but with a deep, shared sense of purpose and commitment. The bond, though not healed, was now acknowledged. Wolf-Face Chapter 21. The Gathering Storm. They returned to the Citadel under the cloak of twilight, slipping into a hidden antechamber near the main hall. Kael emerged alone, using his authority to command an unscheduled truth ceremony during the height of the approaching Harvest Festival. Lysandra, sensing the shift in the political winds and the sudden, dangerous conviction in Kael's posture, immediately confronted him near the dais. You cannot be serious, Alpha, Lysandra hissed, her voice cutting through the festive clamor. A new ceremony, on the holiest day? You are destabilizing the pack. You must wait for the council to reconvene. Kael turned, his eyes burning with an alpha-level unwavering discipline that was no longer cold, but fused with protective warmth. This ceremony is unscheduled, but it is necessary. I am giving the pack what it requires, not more lies, but truth. He held her gaze, overriding her objection with sheer, potent authority. You will be present, Lysandra. You will hear what Luna has to say. As the air thickened, Lysandra realized she was trapped. The The stage was set. Kael walked back to the antechamber, opened the door, and offered his hand to Elara. Kael stood beside Elara on the high dais, feeling the weight of the entire pack's eyes and the profound, strengthening power of the now fully acknowledged mate bond flowing between them. Wolf Face Chapter 22, The Climax. The assembly hall was packed, vibrating with the uneasy energy of the Harvest Festival. Kael began the ceremony, his voice strong but uncharacteristically humble. I stand here tonight, not as an infallible ruler, but as a flawed alpha, Kael declared, the admission shocking the crowd into silence. He admitted his pragmatic failings, his choice to prioritize cold order over honest justice, and the pack's long history of prejudice that had led to Elara's marginalization. Then, with every syllable weighted by truth, he gave the platform entirely to Elara. Elara stepped forward. She did not preach. She simply presented the facts. She held up the ledger, speaking with calm, undeniable authority that was amplified by the presence of the now fully engaged mate bond. She detailed Lysandra's corruption, the poison, the financial theft, and the deliberate political destabilization. Lysandra, seeing her ruin materialize before her eyes, attempted a final, violent distraction. She lunged, not at Kael, but at Elara, aiming for the ledger. Kael reacted on instinct. He didn't use strategy or calculation. He simply stepped in front of Elara, taking the blow, a glancing strike that still drove the air from his lungs. He had made the definitive, non-pragmatic choice. Protecting Elara was more important than protecting himself or his composure. His guard, Roan, and other loyalists immediately restrained Lysandra. Kael, breathing heavily, turned back to the pack. He was injured, vulnerable, and absolutely resolute. Wolf Face Chapter 23, Falling Action. Kael then issued the final decrees. His voice, though strained, held the weight of absolute law. He exiled Lysandra and stripped her key allies of their ranks. He turned to the pack, acknowledging the depth of the corruption and the long road to recovery. We must face the truth. The pack has been sick for generations. The prophecy was fulfilled not through my cold choice, but through the courage of the true Luna. He reached out, gently taking Elara's hand on the dais, a public, profound acknowledgement of their mutual power. Elara Vane will now oversee the restoration of health and balance to the lower ranks. Her authority is absolute. In the quiet that followed, the pack erupted, not in anger, but in relief. The High Council's influence was dismantled. Later, Kael returned to his study. He found Elara waiting, the ledger spread out on his polished desk. He didn't command or question. He simply walked to her and reached out, covering her hand with his. He allowed the full warmth of the mate bond to flow between them, accepting the profound emotional vulnerability and the new reality of their partnership. Wolf Face Chapter 24 Falling Action. Kael and Elara spent the rest of the night planning. The transformation was complete. The first step is reversing the poisoning, Elara explained, pointing to a column in the ledger. We need communal gardens, not just medicine. They need control over their own cure. Kael looked at her, seeing her quiet, focused strength. He realized his future was not as a lonely, pragmatic king fighting chaos, but as a ruler balanced by Luna's wisdom and vulnerability. It will be done, Kael affirmed, no longer sounding like a cold alpha, but a devoted partner. Sunflower Epilogue. Balance a year later. Kael stood overlooking the Citadel grounds. The marble courtyard was still grand, but now it featured a large, flourishing communal healing garden, tended by Elara and the revitalized lower ranks. The Citadel felt warmer, less imposing, filled with the scent of mint and healthy, working wolves. He still maintained his discipline, a habit of a lifetime, but it was now tempered by a genuine, easy trust. He saw Elara across the grounds, laughing with a young beta. He walked toward her. He didn't assert his alpha dominance or use calculated gestures. He simply reached for her hand, and she took it, accepting the full, constant, warm power of the bond. Kael Thorne, the Ice King, was Alpha Kael Thorne, stronger now because he finally allowed his heart to lead his purpose. The pack was healed, and so was he.